Greetings, esteemed viewers. In this video, I'm going to talk about something rather unusual, namely the life and death of Mass Effect 3 multiplayer. Now, these might be rather dramatic terms to use to describe what I'm trying to describe, but I do think they're appropriate at the end of the day. The reason why I'm making this is because I've talked to several people, and indeed teammates of mine, who have noticed a drop in the player base, a lack of general interest, and a lack of interest on their own, for that matter. I spent all my gaming time on the weekend playing Skyrim with the new Dawnguard and various new mods that they're constantly adding from the player base, of course, and it just adds so much so much fun and replayability to the game, and I might get into that in a second just as a comparison. But let's talk about Mass Effect multiplayer. Well, we know it's a bit of a grind. It's just endless repetition. Now, it could be, as Lord Zhhk himself has alluded to, it could be that they simply didn't think that Mass Effect 3 might have been as popular as it has become, or did become, rather. And so they never put in measures that might have made it really fun beyond a certain point. That is, its shelf lifetime, or half-lifetime, to use a scientific term, was destined to be quite minimal if it was to only be based on certain principles. And what are those principles? Essentially, horde mode, the same three factions over and over, surviving waves, with little differentiation in how the game is actually played. What are the things that we did get? We got new weapons, okay. We got many new classes, okay. We got new maps, okay. We got slightly different objectives, okay. But the basic setup of how Mass Effect 3 multiplayer has been played has remained unchanged since the day of its release. It could have been prophesied, and I think it has in fact been, or had been, that Mass Effect 3 multiplayer on the day of its release was destined to die out, and it is moribund. It's very moribund. It's moribund for me too. I play very occasionally at the moment, and I can't imagine playing more frequently, even though I wouldn't mind testing out my new Valiant. I got the Valiant as a commendation pack reward. Never had it before. But, and I might do that for a couple of games, but this endless horde mode without any innovation has killed it. What BioWare seems to be doing every 6 weeks or so is releasing new classes, which is fun and nice. Some of the classes are quite unique. I think the Earth DLC released what could be to date considered some of the most unique classes there are for Mass Effect 3 multiplayer. We have particularly the Shadow with the sword, and just very, very interesting concepts, but their novelty wears off as well, and I will mention the concept of novelty. And, of course, the maps are great. I like London a lot. The London map, not in real life. I've lived in London for several years in real life, and it really is not my cup of tea. But that's neither here nor there. So Mass Effect has these new classes and, of course, new weapons, and they're fun sometimes, and sometimes they're less fun. And that's all well and good, but it is moribund. It's dying out not slowly, but rather surely and rather quickly. The player base has shrunk. The operations are incredibly repetitious. You can only entertain up to a certain point with this modus operandi, this mode of thought. It just doesn't work beyond a certain point. And it was weeks ago when several of my teammates on my friends list decided to sort of drop out of multiplayer because it became a exercise in boring, in epic boredom, if you will. So there's that. And what I do want to mention is I'm going to post a link in the description box. And let me first thank my occasional teammate and the Lord of Bavaria himself, CP Verletzter, assuming he watches this, which I think he will. He sent me the link, and it's a Penny Arcade sort of commentary. Those of you who know Penny Arcade, it's not too short, but also not too long, and it's basically it talks about innovation with regards to computer games, with a specific reference to the famous psychologist Skinner, who researched and developed conditioning for, well, you can watch it in the video. Needless to say, that that video is sort of simply spot on with regards to what's happened to Mass Effect, or what has been the case with Mass Effect 3 multiplayer. We have a game which is the primary motivation for playing is to get rewards. These rewards are rare to extremely seldom. The chances that you actually get them are, well, minuscule at best. The RNG gods are fickle. You have no guarantee whatsoever of getting an ultra rare, let alone one that you want. So to this day, I still have no Harrier. Go figure. But at the same time, and the same token, as it's mentioned in the video, the Penny Arcade video, this same unpredictability, the same lack of reliability in acquiring the weapons and rewards you want, compels you to play well past the point of when the game is actually fun, or was fun. Because that's why, look, I made a farming guide. I mean, I'm no exception here. But that's what it's about. It's about grinding to get credits, whether you're playing for fun or otherwise. The fun factor has evaporated. It's not been there for quite some time. I think everyone would be hard-pressed to argue that the fun factor is still there. We know exactly what to expect. The challenge level is the same. And let us talk about what I consider at this point in time really a monstrous innovation, Platinum. Not because it's really difficult. It's not. I've beat it numerous times. I've even 3-manned it. But it's just, we didn't even get new factions. In fact, the factions in Platinum are so diluted because it's all the same faction. The choice boils down to, in Platinum, whether you want to get more Banshees or more Geth Prime or more Phantoms. I mean, that's at the end of the day what it boils down to. And that's just not a very good thing. So there's that. And I've mentioned that, of course, before. We all know what we think and what I think and what everyone thinks about Platinum. It's not very fun. Gold was more fun. At least you had the individual factions. So, what could be done to save Mass Effect 3 multiplayer? Which it won't be done, I assure you. What could be done is you really need not only new enemy factions, that's a given, but new modes of play, new ways of approaching the game. And to illustrate what I'm talking about, I will give you one such scenario. So, you would have timed missions, just as an example. So in this particular scenario I'm describing, it's fictive, it's imaginary. You have a time mission on the Citadel. Cerberus has set up some sort of explosive devices, a set of explosive devices in various locations. You are there with your fire squad, and for these missions you would need to have at least 2 players. That would make it interesting as well. So you would need to have probably a setup of something like two players holding down the main Cerberus assault force, holding them back rather, and not so much horde mode, such as fighting for your basically naked survival, while the other 2 players in the background are looking for ways of defusing the bomb, and then of course it involves multiple layers and levels, not just one map. And of course, the other players who are looking to defuse the bomb in this scenario will encounter opposition as well. And there might be multiple ways of defusing the bomb, maybe 3 or even 4 different approaches to do it. So there might be a shortcut which involves just battling through masses of enemies, and another one that might require less enemies but is much longer. And if you don't, of course, defuse the bomb on time, the thing explodes and you lose the mission. In the same light, the most difficult path, or the most expedient path, will be up to you to decide, depending on your own skills, your own skill set, and how you approach it, to get the best possible time to not only defuse the bomb, but to get the best time possible. Depending on what your skill set is and how you approach things, that will be either fighting through a horde of enemies, perhaps, taking shortcuts, looking for weak links in the enemy lines in another scenario, things like that. And as a result of that, you may earn more or less credits. Another thing I would suggest, in addition to something like that, new modes of play. This is one example of many. I have other ideas. Would be something like a guaranteed store, a guaranteed ultra rare store, and you could make it as expensive as hell, but that essentially, eventually, you would get it. For example, you could create a store. I don't know what you would call it, when you were guaranteed to get one ultra rare of your choice. You get the rest of the packs, some missiles, some rockets maybe, and things like that. And let's say that cost a lot. Maybe it cost 10 million credits, but at least you get what you want. Those people, of course, it is once again the same punish and reward system, but at least you know what you're getting. And it's much more reliable. So those are just some ideas. I think the most important thing is to have the different modes of play. Without the different modes of play, the path to the grave is assured, and Mass Effect 3 multiplayer, which is dying and has been for quite some time, will die the final death, and there will be no resurrection. It is entirely possible that the developers simply didn't know at the time that Mass Effect 3 multiplayer would be so popular. In fact, I was caught off guard. Just as some disclosure, Mass Effect 3 single player was the game prior to its release that I had looked forward to in the most of my entire life, in all of my 35 years of life. I'd never looked forward to a game as much as I had that game. And what a disappointment it was. The story sucked, the combat was terrible, and, well, you all know how the rest went. Never mind the endings, which had to be forcibly corrected by demands coming from the player base. And so I was caught off guard with Mass Effect multiplayer, but it turned out to be quite fun for a couple of months. And but once again, there are only so many builds you can try, so many things you can try. Let's contrast that with another game, which is of a completely different genre, Skyrim, which is at the moment probably my favorite game, and has been off and on for several months. A sandbox RPG, so it's completely different. But look at the concept there. You really do have near endless combinations. At the moment, I'm running a fascinatingly fun character. I'm playing a female orc, of all things, female orc rogue that exclusively uses crossbows, crossbows being the newest addition from Dawnguard, using some amazing mods, including a mod which has created special perks for crossbow users as opposed to bows. I use this, and I can use the alchemy branch to create explosives that I can attach to my crossbow bolts, things like that. There are just so many possibilities, and part of that is the modding community. Skyrim is unlikely to die anytime soon. In fact, it's not likely to die in 2 or 3 years, hence why. For the same reason Oblivion never did, even though I don't really play Oblivion much more, because the modding community is so great, and because they're allowed to do a lot of great things. Some really talented players who will produce free content and put it up specifically on Test Nexus where it can be downloaded. And one thing, those of you who play Skyrim, I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent, Skyrim Redone, if you don't know that mod, it's the best mod out there for Skyrim. It's the one I talked about with regards to the crossbows. Do download it. So, we have that. And just as an example, what can you do there's no modding allowed in Mass Effect multiplayer. It's the same thing over and over again. There's no unique class approaches. It's either choosing this or choosing that. How much difference is there if you run a build that is I don't know 6'3", 6'5", you get my point. Whether you take 10% extra weapon damage or skip it on your passive and then add three ranks of health and fitness. I mean, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter that much. It doesn't add any different element. Whereas I'm playing an orc rogue firing a crossbow as her primary means of killing. Not only is it challenging, especially when they get up close, but there are lots of other things I can do. I mean, you really can have so many possibilities. The other thing that Bethesda does, which is a lot better than BioWare, is release fairly consistent and constant patches. Like I said, I didn't want to go off too much on a tangent, but in my opinion, you You could look at Skyrim as not a game without flaws, but certainly an excellent game that will have a very, very long shelf life in comparison to Mass Effect 3 and single player and multiplayer. They can, of course, entice us with the occasional reference to, occasional content of new classes, new weapons. I wouldn't mind seeing this Punisher SMG in multiplayer. Nice. But after a certain point in time, it won't work anymore. You need the new modes. Assault mode, that's another one. I mean, time missions. Even player versus player, although that might be difficult to pull off. But as you see, the player base has shrunk. Much fewer people are participating in the operations, and people have stopped caring. Now, let me just say for the record, Zhhk, those of you who know Zhhk, I'm sure you do, he came to light, for the most part, through his MP videos, his multiplayer videos, and yet he does so many other games, and he's really, I would consider, the consummate gamer. I tend to be much more of a guy who just sticks to maybe 2-3 games tops and plays them a lot. He plays all sorts of games. He makes some really great videos, and he really knows how to use Sony Vegas quite well, in contrast to myself. And he really goes to a lot of effort, and yet he's kind of stuck with Mass Effect because not many other people watch his other videos. Just as a show of support, those of you who know his videos, I would suggest you watch the other ones. They're just as good, if not better. He's a really dedicated YouTuber, if you will, a YouTube professional. I mean that in a positive sense. And he's helped me out a number of times, so I'm trying to help him out here. And he's really passionate, too. He'll spend hours not just playing games, but rendering and stuff. And he does it for you guys, for the not just for the subscribers, but for viewers in general. So give him some support, and do watch his stuff. It's quite good. He told me today that he'll be doing a Borderlands 2 let's play, and I think it's going to be really, really good, and I'm looking forward to it. So do watch that if you can. But Zhhk did predict the death, or has predicted for quite of Mass Effect multiplayer. Now I don't know if they can save it. To create new modes, you would really need to revamp the entire game. You would need to create effectively a new multiplayer. Is that possible? Sure. Will BioWare do it? Probably not. So I think we can all look forward to the grave with regards to Mass Effect multiplayer. I've already had a number of subscribers who are still sub to me write me in private messages that they're just not really with it anymore. They've tried everything. And as much as I still want to make guide videos, and I probably will, I guess, here and there and every now and then, it's hard to find the desire because the game is so moribund, and because the game just is lackluster these days. You can only say so much about different builds. There will be newcomers to the game, but the old player base, some of the best players on PC that I used to play with, they're just not there anymore, and I don't see them very much. Most of the time I just play PUGs. I guess sometimes I do farm. But yeah, we need, unless some of the measures are taken. Also, there's a video where Zhhk talks about this as well, so I should suggest you watch it, though I don't have the link handy. And do watch the Penny Arcade link. It's really insightful with regards to games in general, but it specifically applies to Mass Effect multiplayer. Unless some measures are taken, we are seeing the quick and certain death of Mass Effect 3 multiplayer, and there's not much that can be done about it. Do I think BioWare is aware of this stuff? Yes, I do. Do I think they'll get off their lazy asses and do something about it? Probably not. On a final note, I, like many others, was, as usual, disappointed by the so-called balance changes. What do? They change the stomp time delay of enemies that are going to stomp you. I mean, how insignificant is that? Instead of anyway, it just goes to show BioWare doesn't always listen to the player base. If they listen at all, who knows? Anyway, that's what I have to say about that. Sad news indeed, but I think we have to face reality here. This game, in its current incarnation, and as it had been conceived, was not meant to last. And unless BioWare can come up with something far more compelling, with more variety, and a final novelty, everything in gaming, and not just in gaming, but in life in general, but I have another channel where I talk about other things. I'll just talk about gaming here. everything in the game is that keeps you sort of not only interested, but I would imagine the right word might be sort of sucked into the game, drawn into the game. That's based on the novelty factor. With Skyrim constantly producing new mods that do totally new things, also the new DLC. Bethesda makes some really great DLC. Dawnguard is top notch. It's a lot of fun. The lore is really cool too. You're gonna maintain that interest over a long period of time. The same, sadly, cannot be said for Mass Effect multiplayer. That's all I have to say about that, folks. Apologies if you don't like my gameplay-less commentaries, but I've been doing commentaries for quite some time on YouTube on another channel and other channels in addition to that, and so this is just my style. Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope I'd love to hear some feedback, because ultimately this is about the so-called community and what we all think about this. I don't think, and this is not me being arrogant, that I'm alone in my thoughts that Mass Effect is dying and will die out very soon, because it simply cannot keep your interest the way it is set up right now. It simply cannot. So please leave comments, positive, negative. I don't censor people, so, but I think this is the general sentiment, and I'd like to think in a positive manner that I'm actually speaking out for many people when I make this video. And the gods forbid, maybe BioWare will watch it. They probably won't. They don't give a shit about that stuff. But let's see. Anyway, thanks for watching, and take care.